what is up YouTube? Welcome to today's video. And a lot of people have been asking me what have I been doing to farm all of these brothers gifts. And I have found over 15 of them in my map sample size of around 120 to 130 maps. Now these maps are all relatively expensive, and just to give you a little bit of a glimpse as to what it looks like, the map and how to actually run it, you basically put in the map and then you want to run to the boss while killing as little mobs as possible. So you remove the altar option. Well, that's actually a lot of maps that dropped. There must be some, I don't even know what that is. But some monster popped and it dropped a bunch of maps. But basically you run to the boss so you don't get the altars that have the boss option. So you only have player option or eldritch minion. And what we're looking for is usually the player option that can dupe divination cards. You can dupe minions. So you can see right there, it gave us increased quantity and rarity. And again, more quant and rarity. So once we get these things stacked up, that's when we want to use all the league mechanics like the Strongboxes, the Abyss. So we look right here, we have around 279% quant, 242% rarity. And after you clear out of maps, all of the map, and you'll see that Lightning Arrow actually clears the map really, really well. A lot of times I'm like, wow, are there any mobs left in Cemetery? And Cemetery is kind of not the best layout map in the world. There's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of different layouts to it. And the wide open space makes it really annoying for looting. So you can see here we're rounding up the last amount of mobs. And those are actually one of the worst rare modifiers, is that mobs that are immune. So you can see I did get a Brother's Gift right here. Now I did choose this map because I did get the Brother's Gift. But I actually got a Brother's Gift and a Brother's Stash in this map. So most of the the cards does come from the Strongboxes, and that's just how it is because the Strongbox mobs have such an insane amount of quantity added to them. So that's how we actually found most of the cards. Now this method is not the best farming method, I have to admit. It's not going to be 10 divines per hour, and it does have a little bit of RNG regarding the uniques that you find and regarding how many brothers gifts to brother stashes you get. Both of them seem to be around the same rarity, but I have had people in my chat tell me that they got like 8 brother stashes in a row, so that would feel really, really bad. Now I did try out this farm with 2 variants, the Abyss variant and the Legion variant. Now the Abyss variant actually has a little bit of a tech that I discovered that someone told me about, is that you have these things called projectiles. So if you find a map with 2 additional projectiles, and when you run a lot of 8 mod maps, you actually have a bunch of these maps to choose from. So you have these 2 additional projectile maps. Now the way that this works is that the Scarab says abysses in areas that do not lead to an abyssal depths lead to a Stygian spire. So what this spire does is it spawns a lot of mobs. So let's see. This is an Abyss map. So you can see we're following the Abyss. Now the nice part about Abyss is you can kind of loot while the Abyss mobs are spawning. So what the spire does is it spawns mobs. It shoots out these things that spawn mobs. And the nice part about that is when you have 2 additional projectiles, it actually becomes 3 additional projectiles with Wandering Path. So when the spire shoots out mobs or shoots out these projectiles, it spawns a bajillion mobs. So you can see right there, it shoots out a large amount of mobs, those green circles, and there's so many rares. And once you kill them, you get a bunch of uniques. And that's how I farmed a lot of high tier uniques with this Abyss strategy. And it was pretty fun. It was really, really rippy though. I did die a lot, especially with the rolls on the map. It is very, very difficult to stay alive if you're running a full Magic Find setup. Now, I did end up running around 300% rarity and 90% quantity. So you can see right here, I have 90% quantity and 370% rarity. So I actually have a lot of rarity and quantity. So my results are going to be a lot better than someone who's not running any sort of Magic Find. Now, I did try this setup out with my character with both Headhunter, Mageblood, and Bisco's Leash. They each have their positives and negatives. Now, the Headhunter I do believe is the best option. It kind of trivializes both the Legion and the Abyss. It makes it so that you never die. I do think that Mageblood probably has the highest amount of rarity that you can possibly fit on, because you can get the rarity gold flask. And I am running an Inspired Learning with the Mageblood setup, so I kind of have a little bit of the Headhunter to it, not fully. So lastly, we also have the Bisco's Leash. Now this is the most budget option, of course. And I was also running Inspired Learning with Bisco's Leash. The big thing is if you're running a Bisco's Leash, you probably should not run Greed's Embrace. Greed's Embrace has this nasty downside where you have 20% reduced movement speed. And when you don't have the Mage Blood Flask for the movement speed, it actually feels terrible. So let's see here. So my helmet, I'm running a Berserk Effect helm. Reduced mana cost of attacks, 8% reservation efficiency of skills. Now, what I was looking for on this helm was any T1 life regen roll. And I crafted this with Essences of Greed, spamming the life roll. Then we got some lightning res, which helps out a little bit. And then we got a rarity craft. Now, what would be even better was if the lightning res was an open suffix and I could have crafted on rarity from slain, unique and rare monsters. Now, I did exalt on the thorns, but we can actually remove that, especially with Eldritch Implicits. It's not too bad to recraft the helm, but I did want to get a better helm later on. Now, for the amulet, I am using Eyes of the Great Wolf, 16% quant, 18% attack and cast speed. And the bow, this is actually the same bow as I had since day 1 or 2 of the league. Additional arrow, crit multi, crit chance, and then flat fizz, life, and I crafted elemental damage with attacks. Now, I am running a Pariah for the 15% quantity. And a Ventors, this thing costs around 9 divines, and this has a lot of quant and rarity to it. Now, Greed's Embrace I'm using, I have 15% quant, 48% rarity. It should be corrupted, and also my Comb Spirits is pretty terrible. I should have a higher resist amount, and I should also get a attack speed corrupt or frenzy charge corrupt or plus crit corrupt. Now, Mage Blood, we have a rarity Mage Blood, and this actually has 4 flasks, so it's not completely bricked. And then Gold One we're using for the 20% quant. We have 5% life and 100 life regen while moving. Now, for a lot of people wondering, how do we actually use Divination Distillate? The Forbidden Flame and Flesh makes it so that life flask effects are not removed when unreserved life is filled. Now, there is a way around this, is you can use Petrified Blood. So what Petrified Blood does is that usually you have to drop a defensive aura. So in this case, you would drop that. And Petrified Blood does allow you to link flat life auras or flat value auras to your life pool, so you can put Arrogance Precision or Arrogance Vitality and you'll have some of your life reserve. But basically what happens with Petrified Blood, if we read it, is that you can't actually recover your life to above low life, so you can't recover your life above 50%. So in this case, when we press our flask, even when we're leeching off the mobs, we'll never leech above 50%. Only way to go above 50% is to use your flask, and the flask effect actually gets canceled out with Blood Rage. So we're always going to be at a state where the flask is always going to be on as long as our Blood Rage is on. So that's just one way of getting around having to use the 60 or 45 Divine Forbidden Jewel set. Now, I do think with Wandering Path, the maps are honestly just too crazy. The best way for defense is evasion, in my opinion, as you get one-shotted for all the damage scaling. There's really no build that's going to stay alive. We have minus 20% max res. You're taking the altars with negative 60% physical damage reduction, and it's just a nightmare. And I think Greed's Embrace, like I said, should only be used with Mage Blood. Now, one thing I'm still using is Comb Spirit. I actually just like the Berserk effect too much. And the way that we get the life regen without, without running Vol's Vision is we have T1 life regen on the helmet. We're running Vitality, which gives like 2 life regen, and we have the Mage Blood Flask, which has regenerate 3% of life. And there's also like some Watcher's Eye you can technically do with Vitality that gives you more life regen. And technically this thing also gives us 100 life while we're moving. There's also a Pantheon that gives you, right here, regenerate 2% of life while stationary. And lastly, since we're using our life flask all the time, regenerate 2% of life per second if you use a life flask in the past 10 seconds. So there's a lot of different ways to get that rage regeneration that we need. Now, for the Atlas, we are using Wandering Path, as this allows us to get the maximum amount of quantity from 8 mod maps. And the only difference between the 2 Atlases for Abyss and Legion is that on Abyss, we're taking all the Abyss nodes that spawn more monsters and have an increased chance of getting Abysses. And for Legions, we're taking all the Legion nodes that grant Legion chance, and then the general selections for Mariketh and Templar. And with the Splinter duplication, I'm not really sold on the Splinter duplication, because the sets for Legion are just so dirt cheap. So I did farm around 16 sets or so. So maybe it's worth it. Not really 100% sure. We want to take all of the map duplication nodes. So we have 37% chance to duplicate the map. And the higher map chance tier and singular focus, a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually get more T16 map drops if you have the maps have found 10% chance to be 1 tier higher, and it's some sort of map equity system that GGG has in store. Now, next up for the Scarabs and Sextants, and I don't really want to put the cost of the materials because the materials cost does change a lot. So we have 8 mod corrupted maps. I know this goes around like 80 to 90 chaos. Enraged Strongbox is probably around 90 chaos. Additional Strongbox, I like to buy the elevated Sextant variant. So that gives us 3 additional Strongboxes instead of 2. So is this one right here. And then lastly, I'm using 2 additional Abysses. And if we're doing Legion, we want to just run the additional Legion encounter instead. Now, for the Scarabs, I'm using Gilded Divination, Gilded Reliquary. If you're not using Magic Find, you could probably drop the Gilded Reliquary and run Gilded Cartography so you can get more 8 modded maps. And I'm using Gilded Ambush for more Strongboxes and Gilded Abyss. Now we want to use Gilded Abyss because if we look at right here, Polished Abyss doesn't have the Spire. And it's really important we get the Spire, especially if we're running the maps with 2 additional projectiles. Now, on the map device craft, we want to use Ambush. Oh yeah, and if you're doing Legion, you want to use Polished Legion so you can get the guaranteed Warhorde in every single Legion. Now, the results overall was I ended up with 15 Brothers Gifts and 9 Brothers Stashed around in 140 maps. I didn't keep an exact count, but that's around how many based on the amount of invitations that I actually got. And I did put the blue invitation on always. Now, stuff that you can sell from the results of this farm is that you'll have a surplus of 8 mod maps to sell, and you're going to have a lot of them. And you want to try to cherry pick the good ones out to run. So if you want to run like the Abyss, you want to go type in Projectiles and try to run all of the 2 additional Projectiles, ones that you find. And then Beyond is also something that's really good. You can get some Tainted Orb of Fuses. So before you sell the map, you should kind of cherry pick out the good ones, and that should increase your profit a little bit. Now, you need to have some Magic Find, I think, in order to have better results. The Magic Find does scale multiplicatively off the quantity of the Strongbox. And a lot of my profit also came from random high value uniques like Hyri's Ire, Lion Eyes Fall, Unnatural Instinct, Storm Shroud, Aegis Aurora. I also found something like this, Eyes of the Great Wolf, the 16% quant. And there's just a bunch of random items that you can find that's going to be worth a good chunk. So this thing is already going to be like, 11 divines, 12 divines right there. I also found a Brass Dome, 5% max res that I sold for 5 divines. And I think I found like 3 Hyri's Ire total and 1 Lion Eyes Fall Jewel. There's a lot of different things. And I do think that the Abyss monsters and Legion monsters are more responsible for the uniques than the cards. But I did get a few Brothers Gifts and cards from the Abyss monsters. Now, the maps are very, very difficult with Wandering Path. And the Abyss mobs are crazy. There's something very nasty about the Abyss mobs. They go underground and then they just one-shot you right away. And there are some maps that I completely failed. And this is definitely not the best strategy for pure money making due to the cost of the inputs. It was a lot better at the start when the Enraged Strongbox sections are only 55, 60 chaos. But the cost of the maps just really keep going up. Especially the 8 mod map section. That one was like 40 chaos. Now, Cemetery is a horrible map for Delimir. And looting is actually very, very annoying as it's spread out everywhere. Especially when you're doing Legion, you'll find yourself running back and forth to pick up stuff. Now, I do think that in the long run, and I do think Crimson Temple is better than Cemetery, especially if the Apothecary prices keep rising. My theory was that Cemetery could be a little bit better maybe because Apothecary was only at 35 divines for the longest time. But I do think that Crimson Temple will probably beat out this strategy because you can use Delimir, which does add a lot of quant. And also Crimson Temple has a bunch of other cards like 7 Years Bad Luck and Enlighten, which does help out the overall money. And I do think that Cemetery is not the greatest for altars as it's relatively inconsistent. But let me know down in the comments below if you tried this farm. And if you do try it out, let me know. Just know buyer beware in the sense that it might not be the best profit ever. I didn't really calculate it all out. I just wanted to put out the method that I use in case anyone was interested in just finding some Brothers Gifts and just killing a bunch of mobs. But thanks for watching. I hope you find more Mirrors, Divines, and Brothers Gifts than me. And see you next time. Bye!